Hey everyone, welcome back. This is John Coleman. We have another exciting episode of Friends with Your Benefits. Today we have with us a guest and one of the leading experts out there, Bern here. And Bern is here to talk about reference-based pricing. Hey Bern, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's going great.
So Bern, before we get started, I want our viewers to get to know you a little bit better. So can you tell our viewers one fun fact about yourself?
One fun fact. Well, I like to build boats. I've built all kinds of boats, from a skin-on frame canoe. Right now, I'm building a little 14-foot replica of a mahogany runabout from the 50s. So.
Incredible. How long does it actually take to make one of these boats?
It depends on the boat. This one's about a 6-month build.
That's a long build. So, Bern, obviously, as we mentioned in the thumbnail, today we really want to separate fact from fiction. And as you are one of the leading experts as it relates to reference-based pricing, can you actually tell us what reference-based pricing is and whether or not employers should actually consider it as it relates to their health insurance offering?
Sure. So reference-based pricing is a plan in which the traditional network insurance company, meaning Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, United Healthcare, sometimes Kaiser, we throw it in, is replaced by a plan that has no network. Okay. And the reason that we do that is that the agreements that these network companies have with providers, especially facilities, are part of the problem with runaway healthcare costs. The way they calculate their reimbursements to facilities is by applying a discount to a wildly inflated billed charge from those facilities. All right. So rather than that approach, which results in massive overpayments, what reference-based pricing does is we refer to a specific number, mostly Medicare. We see what does Medicare pay. We add a generous margin to that, and we pay or reimburse to the provider that number rather than sort of the down sloping discount that the traditional carriers use. So we replace the network because the network agreements are the problem.
So in my mind, if you hear no network, that should be a win for employees, right? And members, because they don't have to worry about, hey, I have to look at this app and see, is this provider in my particular network? It's whether or not they accept Medicare, right? Is that the general rule of thumb?
Well, they don't necessarily have to accept Medicare. Most providers do, of course. But yeah, there is no network. In other words, as long as a provider will submit claims to the insurance company, which the vast majority do, then that provider is accessible to the members in a reference-based pricing plan.
Sure. And then obviously, certainly there's a lot of savings to this. And these are one of the areas where the savings aren't some black box. I'd say it's probably easy to identify what the potential savings are, but want your thoughts on that, Bern. Do you necessarily agree? Is this something that's relatively easy to figure out the savings for?
It's relatively easy to project based on the geographic location of the members in the group and a few other factors. But I mean, generally, we're looking at a first-year savings in the 20 to 35% range, depending on the group.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. So I think if I personally take a look at the savings, right? To me, the savings definitely make sense. You're basically, instead of paying 300% of Medicare, you might be paying 150% or whatever the rational rate is for those particular facilities, right? But one of the most common objectives that I personally hear from employers is they're scared that their employees might be subject to these massive balance bills. What do you say to employers out there who have those hesitations?
Certainly that is a concern and a valid concern. I would say communication is a key part of success in a reference-based pricing plan. So, the employees have to know what they're getting into. There has to be communication, and part of that communication is going to revolve around what to do when you get a balance bill. All right. So balance bills do happen. I will say that employees are getting balance bills under their current network plans too. Okay, the only thing is that they have no place to turn to get them resolved. Right. So most of the companies in the reference-based pricing space have a very good process for resolving balance bills, removing the member from that interaction with the facility or with the provider, and dealing with them and getting them put to bed, bringing them to a soft landing, however you want to term it. So the balance bills is something employees need to know that they may receive, understand that there's something that they can do with that to offload it to somebody else. But the bigger problem I've learned in reference-based pricing is not necessarily the balance bills, it's access issues. Okay. And without a network is so ingrained in everybody's head, including on the provider side.
Sure.
When you walk into a physician's office with your shiny new ID card and there's not a Cigna or an Aetna or a United Healthcare logo on it, there's generally going to be some pushback from that front desk, from whoever's admitting you into that provider, so that they understand what the plan is, how they're going to get paid, whether they're going to get paid, whether they accept, how they work with that. So the access issues really is what causes most of the noise and friction from employees in a reference-based pricing plan as opposed to balance bills.
Sure. So I guess, Bern, one thing that I was wondering, right, and maybe you can help me answer this. So you mentioned earlier that most providers and most facilities do accept Medicare, right? So if an employer out there is willing to give them a markup on Medicare, why do they have a problem with accepting, let's say, 150% of Medicare, but they're okay accepting 100% of Medicare from the federal government? Seems like a massive disconnect to me.
That's a really good question, John, and I'm not sure that there's a great answer to it. I mean, I certainly can't speak for hospitals or health systems as to why the bottom line is, they're getting it now from the network carriers. And, I think looking at the profits, net income, because most of them are technically nonprofits, they're putting revenue over care. That's really the bottom line.
Interesting. So there are a number of reference-based pricing companies that are out there, right? Yeah. So you're obviously the expert, as mentioned before. If an employer is interested in perhaps kicking the tire on this, what are some things that they should look out for as it relates to some of the reference-based pricing vendors, and I guess TPAs as well, that partner with them in the marketplace?
So first of all, TPA, you definitely want to go with a TPA that has some experience in the reference-based pricing space. I think it's a mistake if an employer is self-funded now to insist that they stay with the same TPA if that TPA doesn't have reference-based pricing experience. So I think that's important. The other thing that I think is critical for employers is to utilize a reference-based pricing company that becomes a named fiduciary in the health plan document. Right? That is absolutely critical to me. And I will say that anytime I've spoken to a company and their attorney or their general counsel is part of the meeting, they always go with a company that has that's a named fiduciary. Okay. The other important piece references back to what I talked about before, which is the access issues. Some of the companies have programs in place where employees can nominate physicians or facilities for that matter, and somebody from the reference-based pricing company or the TPA or the advocacy company, at some point, there's a mechanism for an outreach to a provider before a patient shows up to have that uncomfortable conversation or have that conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation when the employee shows up in the waiting room and, that provider knows nothing about reference-based pricing, has never heard of the company. And that really is, again, what causes the noise and friction. So a company that has that sort of pre-appointment outreach process in place, I think is really critical to kind of tame that noise and confusion that tends to happen at the outset of a reference-based pricing plan.
So Bernie, a lot of great information there. Appreciate the insight. And certainly there's a lot of considerations that employers will have to make if this is something they really want to pursue for the future, right? Yeah. If an employer out there is watching and they want to know more information about reference-based pricing, where can they go to reach you?
Best thing to do is to message me on LinkedIn, or they can reach out to you and you can steer them to me. So.
Absolutely. Well, Bernie, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate you coming on the show. For those of you out there, if you like what you're seeing, we encourage you to like the video, comment below, share the video. Love to hear your feedback on reference-based pricing And until next time, thank you for joining.